character who goes by the name Koichi once said,
"The tribes have plenty of defenses."
And what I want to know is this true? We're going to take a look at Natlan's defenses, both within the main city as well as the other tribes, its overall geography, architecture, military, technology, and of course, the Abyss itself, to see if Natlan could feasibly survive an Abyss invasion as it currently stands. So, what if the heroes never appeared, and the Pyro Archon was essentially just another vision bearer, albeit the strongest one? Would the Natlanese survive an Abyss invasion? Yeah, it's not looking too hot. I say we try to answer this question by first taking a look at each individual tribe and the stadium. Let's tunnel on over to Natlan's capital city to find out. Over to you, B. Breaking news. A Genshin player that goes by the name Lumine Lover has become the first player to obtain what looks to be a brand new 5-star browser? Opera GX, the gaming browser that has more features than the Genshin teapot. It has dedicated wallpapers that react to your actions in the browser, and even a light mode for those of you that are extra freaky. Background music and keyboard sounds that make you feel like you're hacking the Conrian mainframe. Custom shaders, and even splash screens that are cleaner than my inventory. Yeah, it's abysmal. Get up. To install mods, all you need to do is click this icon, and it will take you to a page where you can choose your background. And everything is customizable, including the icon for the browser itself. But what if you're in the middle of fighting a Hydro local legend with just the Hydro Traveler at level 40, but you also want to watch the Oratrice Mécanique d'Analyse Cardinal while doing so, you ask? Well, you can! The pop-out video feature allows you to do both. Opera GX even allows you to import data from your previous browser, making the transition super fast and easy, unlike my artifact grind. So if you want a browser that you can truly customize to make it completely yours, download Opera GX today using my link down in the description. Thank you, B. I'm here outside the Stadium of the Sacred Flames to inspect their defenses and see if they're truly fit to stand against an invasion. Now, technically, you can argue that the stadium isn't so much a city as it is more of a gathering place, or most likely it's meant to play a similar role to an Inca fortress, as well as being the last line of defense for Natlan. Being the heart of Natlan where the Sacred Flame resides, it goes without saying that it should be the most well defended, and it is the only civilization with walls. At first glance, the stadium looks rather secure by all regards. All of the tribes make great use of the topography, while also complementing their individual tribe customs and culture. Natlan City is no different here when it comes to geography. The beating heart. Whew, no, I'm good. Just a bit of heartburn. Get it? Because it's the heart of Natlan and fire. Is this bit over yet? The center point of the entire Natlan region, the stadium is situated on a large cliff that is almost completely isolated from the rest of the land. There are 3 entry points into the city. It does somewhat resemble Tenochtitlan in this regard, just without the water, and instead an extremely long drop to your doom. There are both pros and cons to this, however. The most obvious issue, of course, being that the more entry points, the more potential vulnerabilities. You have more access and escape routes, but also more weaknesses that an enemy can exploit. 2 of these entrances have wooden bridges connecting them. The narrowing path and subsequent bridge would already slow down approaching enemies tremendously. All they would need to do to stop an advance is break the bridges, either by cutting the rope or burning them, though it probably would have been more beneficial if they made them retractable. With no cover all along the surrounding cliff face, we might assume that this would leave enemies open to attack from within the stadium. Canonically correct, traveler. However, the city is too far away from the mainland. Even in the event that they were a bit closer, the land is too uneven and actually works in the enemy's favor if anything. This cliff face here, for example, is the perfect vantage point to see inside the whole city. But more importantly, the architectural design of the city simply would not allow for counterattacks or volleys from archers. It doesn't have any tower defenses or proper outer walls. What is this? There's absolutely zero practicality here. This whole section could be fortified with some walls and an access point, allowing for guards to actually, I don't know, observe the outer perimeters.
What is that thing?
I understand that by design, being the region of war and growing up, everyone is taught to fight, but guards are generally still a good idea, because otherwise you're just going to be caught off guard in the event of an approaching army. Also, only one entrance point has a door. Yeah, those other 2 entrances, any enemies make it past the bridge, they can just waltz right on in. But if we ignore that and say, okay, the bridges serve as a big enough deterrent, all the enemies would funnel into this choke point. This entrance is still arguably the weakest point, exactly because it has a land connection. Wait a minute, is this Gross. So how about we segue into the rest of the architecture now? Does it complement the surrounding landscape and heighten its defenses? Well, we can already see a few issues arising as we look closer. The walls, a region that takes heavy inspiration from the Inca, and not a single terrace wall? Okay, no, but seriously, the walls are, well, they're not walling. As we established, the land connection is by far the city's biggest weakness. Why, you ask? Walk with me for a moment. Weak point number 1, and because of its position, probably a very easy way to sneak on into the city. Weak point number 2. This isn't even a wall, it's just a balcony. But do you want to know what the worst defender is? They couldn't even keep the wall going all around. And what this ends up doing is creating an entire section of the city that's a lot more vulnerable. Like I mentioned earlier, at least in theory, if they just added doors here, this wall could be blocked off to create an extra section and layer of defense. So, tell me a bit about this nightmare you had. Okay, I was inspecting the safety of Natlan. You know, it's kind of in my line of work. And I came across multiple safety concerns where half the wall just didn't exist. Then mavuika appeared out of it all Attack on Titan style and started singing about friendship. Let these flames burn bright. And then, the entire cast of Natlan just kept telling me how amazing of a person she is.
She's the idol of every warrior in our land.
An Ororon handed me a radish, but it turned out it was an aranara. However, there are some positives about the walls too. While there aren't many examples of curved walls in Inca architecture, they did exist. And the thing is, this probably made more sense in Natlan's case, as it allowed them to better adapt to the shape of the land and allow for more structural stability. Not only this, but a large emphasis was placed on merging structure into the natural environment. And I think this is somewhat visible, such as with the material and colours of the walls. And blending in with the natural landscape is observed not only at the stadium, but throughout all of Natlan's tribes to an extent. But in a more basic sense, the circular structure of the city is because sun. It's round because sun. The wall columns also have some Inca elements fused into them, the red and gold colouring, the abstract carved designs, and the well-known architectural slope and panel style. The stadium, as an administrative hub, provides a myriad of functions. It's separated into various districts, so even if one section is destroyed, people can fall back to the next. The outer wall, you know, the one with half of it missing. The Temple of Pax district on this side, which is also where the blacksmith is located. Okay, I'm ready to mine for my primos. Given how small the blacksmith area in the stadium is, the loss of the Children of Echo's tribe hub would deal a very heavy blow to their weapons production. The weapon supply likewise is not in good condition at all. Then there's the Temple of Pax, which, given Natlan's cultural inspirations from the Inca, who also worshipped the sun and had temples dedicated to them, even within the fortresses, and the recurring sun motifs around the region, it makes sense. On the other side is the market hub, where all the trade between the tribes takes place. This area could be used as a massive storehouse and to resupply the military. It could also be useful in the case of a siege. These sections inside could essentially be used as bunkers. Oh, about that. Yeah, there's a lot of holes in that roof. What's to stop a big lava shell from just crashing on in? Then finally, we get to the inner district of the stadium, the arena. The stadium looks to be the only place in that land that would have taken a large workforce and coordinated effort between all the tribes to build. How is this rock pillar still standing? If we look from a Natlanese perspective, we can kind of see why they wouldn't place particular emphasis on defenses. It's more of a culture of bringing the fight to the enemy, but for a fortress that acts as the main hub for all the people and the home of the Sacred Flame, it really should be more heavily fortified. The nation could also really do with taking more advantage of their air balloon technology. The Flower Feather clan does, so why not make it nationwide and even go so far as installing some landings at the stadium?
More makes a lot of problems go away.
While they don't appear in the overworld, the war scenario shows us that they do indeed have landings all over the region. Investing money toward this would be super helpful for the war effort in general. By and large, the biggest problem they would face is Abyss portals. We see for a moment in the Archon quest cutscene that the Abyss does indeed manage to spawn directly at the gates of the city, but mavuika reignites the flame with the Gnosis, causing Goth, the heart of the Abyss, to be unable to go near it. As long as Natlan is in possession of the Pyro Gnosis, mavuika tell your people they need better defenses. The Abyss cannot spawn directly near the Sacred Flame, aka the stadium. However, it can and does still spawn portals near other civilizations. As we find out during this quest, the more people are gathered in a single area, the more likely the Abyss is to spawn there. Basically, it's attracted to large groups and so aims for the tribes. The Abyss tumors likewise also appear outside each tribe's location. If we take a look at the war scenario from the Archon quest, yeah, I'm looking at you, people of the Springs. The two bastions of civilization that seem to hold out longest are the people of the Springs and the Children of Echoes. This is honestly rather perplexing, so how about we head on over to the Springs to see why. But first we actually need to make our way there. See, Natlan is a vast network of roads. Granted, they aren't as developed, but there were plenty of roads in the Inca road system that weren't paved. It does still stretch across the entirety of the region and connects each tribe to the central city, for the most part. And again, just like the main city, there are plenty of instances along these roads that can serve as defensive barriers. The route leading from the city to the Masters of the Nightwind, for example, probably fairly easy for these tribe members to move back and forth, but presents a problem for Abyss forces, leaving them open and vulnerable to attack. My main issue with this entire region comes down to trade. Yes, the geography makes for a much more easily defendable position and natural advantage for the tribe members in tune with the powers, but how are necessities transported? We know lifts exist in Teyvat, and I don't mean the super advanced ones we see at Yilong Wharf or Fontaine, even just ones such as what we see in the Chasm, so I wouldn't put it past Natlan to also have these. However, there's no evidence of this. It's all well and good being able to fly, but I don't think cargo can do that on its own, nor injured people for that matter. Not to get too far off topic, but I doubt everyone can ride or use a saurian. We do see this explored a little bit during Chuska's story quest with the wingless who can't ride the kukasaurs, and where they literally invent jetpacks, by the way, which, okay, of all the out of place technology that is in Natlan, at least these kind of work, as in they blend in more with the tribe's aesthetic. Anyway, the most plausible answer is that they must use air balloons to transport cargo. If we head on down the road toward the Springs, we see yet another example. The wide road transforms into a narrow cliff path with an outpost right along it, and easily defendable from invaders. Natlan's overall terrain would do a lot to hinder an army's movements. Now, I know the stadium is the only area to have actual fortifications, but I mean, surely you guys can do better than this. There's no walls. Wait, what? You might as well just paint an Abyss Mage target on your back. You know, I think my biggest gripe with this tribe in particular is that its location doesn't really serve any advantage. Unlike the scions, for example, that are high up and can use the saurians to move around, the people of the Springs would have been set up much better if they were on an island instead. That way they could play way more into their biggest asset, water. H2O. See, the thing is, Abyss enemies, well, enemies in general in Teyvat, don't do well with water, and the people of the Springs could have used this as their wall essentially, their line of defense. If this was the case, wall fortifications wouldn't be much of a necessity. Most of them can either ride a Kaholasaur or Sur, so if Abyss enemies did spawn directly in the town, they could take to the waters and attack from there. But the location of their tribe just has way too many weaknesses and openings, and doesn't play into this inherent advantage well at all. It's surrounded by land that is pretty flat and easily traversable. There are multiple unguarded entry points where enemies could just waltz on in. I suppose the narrow pathways could hinder enemy advancement, but not significantly. And not only this, the people of the Springs' primary building material is wood. A few pyro abyss mages and slime barrels, and these buildings would go up in flames. The people of the Springs take heavy inspiration from Polynesian culture. A central part of this culture is seafaring, which disappointingly isn't really a thing with the people of the Springs. They don't have any docks, nor boats or canoes, but there is a huge surfing culture and navigating water is a strength of theirs. And to be fair, they do have spirit ways, these phlogiston-y pathways that spawn in the air. Note though that unlike other phlogiston related stuff, the people of Natlan don't really understand how these ones work. Spirit ways would give them an aerial advantage over enemies, but they can only be used by a limited amount of people that have mastered them. Now for the people of the Springs themselves, as in the people that are the Springs, yeah, okay. So while every tribe does participate in battle, and most people again are brought up to fight in Natlan, the people of the Springs don't exactly have a great reputation. They're often viewed as lazy because of their relaxed nature and pastimes, and honestly, there is some credence to this. For one, they don't prioritize bolstering defenses until it's too late. Instead, their tribe leader, up until recently, prioritized entertainment ventures over ensuring the safety of the tribe. Then there's this lifeguard who explains that way too many locals end up drowning or getting into dangerous situations. We get a first-hand look at how the people of the springs handle an abyss incursion right at their doorstep. And it's mentioned that they do have patrols. Presumably every tribe has patrols outside the main towns, so they have one line of defense there. And I imagine these warriors here on the outskirts are the defense in question. We didn't have enough people to prevent them from breaking through our defenses. What defenses? An abyss pylon on the outskirts of the tribe. If only you guys had something that would cause the enemies that spawn to funnel through a single choke point. But the abyss corrodes everything, and this isn't just limited to people, something we get a first-hand look at with Ateo. It affects the very land itself, making it unsustainable. I imagine even if the people of the springs did manage to hold back a majority of the abyss's invading forces, the damage to the environment would not be good. Essentially all the abyss needs to do to win against this tribe is infect the waters. This could eventually have a compounding effect on the whole of Natlan. A corrupted water supply is generally not a great thing. To be fair, this is another small gripe I have, in that there's no indication of how water is accessed in Natlan. There also aren't any aqueducts. We could make an assumption though, given what we do know. For one, the Aztecs and Inca both used underground aqueduct systems, and two, Natlan has the Children of Echoes, of whom could construct an underground aqueduct system quite easily. Hey, what's that? Oh, that's just another one of Gilliland's dance parties. What? Now let's head over to the tribe that managed to outlast the abyss the longest. The Children of Echoes actually have 2 sentry posts that guard this choke point, but none on the other side. This side is especially vulnerable considering there's no civilization on the other side, just vast land and desert. But in saying that, actually, the landscape itself could still assist the Children of Echoes. If enemies were to spawn on the other side of the desert, they would first have to trudge through this, and then, after arriving, travel through this valley, which is also a choke point. So if the tribe were to have a scout notice this ahead of time, they could easily position themselves atop the cliffs and win the fight. Anyway, as for the 2 outposts, this one is most likely right next to the sulfurous veins precisely because of how volatile the area is, and is a likely place for the abyss to come from. That doesn't look good. And they also picked a good spot because, as you can see, it's only accessible through this bridge, blocked off on other sides by rock and cliff, advantageous to a tribe that's able to scale cliffs with ease. And the buildings themselves are carved out of this very rock. This other one has multiple levels to it, and again makes use of the natural landscape. It also has these buildings are similar in nature to Inca structures that tended to be stops along roads and acted as storage complexes and administrative centers, as well as places for people to rest. The really good thing about the Children of Echoes is, of course, that it's partially underground, surrounded by impenetrable rock. Impenetrable for everyone but its tribe members, that is.
As a child, I yearned for the
So if we
mines.
enter through the main entrance, it's already quite difficult to traverse through, and might I add, definitely a safety violation. I still have no idea if or where the canonical entrance to this place is. This is the main and only entrance into the valley, right? But then how do people get to the upper level? I can only assume they climb up this ramp, but they really should add some lifts. Now if you do manage to survive as a member of a tribe that has numerous safety violations. Okay, to be fair, they do have safety gloves and visors, but still, the next step is surviving an abyss invasion. While abyss portals can seemingly spawn just about anywhere, it wouldn't really be the play for them to do so right in the heart of the tribe. They'd be surrounded and wiped out in an instant. So the abyss has a few other options for this one. There are multiple choke points before the enemies would even be able to reach the main part of the tribe. As we already established, the enemy forces would be slowed quite significantly heading through here, as the valley gets thinner and the path more uneven. Now, I don't know what these things are. They're all over the tribe's territory, so I don't think they're really meant to act as defensive stakes, but they do at the very least create even more of a bottleneck, as does this entrance. But what's more important about this part is all the tribe would need to do is create a small rock slide, and then, combined with the rocks already hanging there precariously, this entire section would be blocked off. But okay, say for whatever reason the enemy did make it through, they would still be extremely exposed. Considering this is just a thin layer of rock, it could be easily destroyed, halting enemy advance even more. I mean, basically, as long as enemies are spawning on ground level, they don't really stand a chance because they're open to long range attacks. They also have 2 bridges in the middle of the valley, so they could retreat to the other side if need be and cut off access by destroying them. The abyss enemies would stand more of a chance heading in from this direction since it's practically unguarded, but as long as the tribe took quick enough action, they have multiple counterattack opportunities here too. Hey, so There's a giant army heading straight for you.
Wait, what?
Either by causing a cave in here or destroying this bridge. And given how the cliff tops are shaped, it would be too awkward for enemies to attack from above as well. However, for all the good the Children of Echoes has, do you know what hilichurls in particular have that we often forget about? Explosive slime barrels. A few well-placed barrels could easily cause a cave in, maybe chuck them in from above too. And while it might not cause catastrophic damage, it would still deal a significant blow to the tribe. They would be put into a frenzy, and the Abyss enemies could take advantage of this and bulldoze their way right on in. Also, on a completely unrelated note, it must be so loud constantly throughout this tribe. How would anyone be able to get any sleep here? From what we've seen, none of the Abyss tumors or pylons spawn directly inside the tribes, so they all have a degree of protection, if that's what we're rolling with. So then, why in the Archon Quest scenario did the scions of the canopy fall faster than the people of the springs? Because if you look at this place, in theory, it looks very defendable. If a large horde of monsters were to attempt an attack on the tribe, they would first have a very steep climb to make. There's also an outpost along the road. Then they would have to push through a narrow valley and head under the cover of a tall forest, but more importantly, leave themselves open to attack. All these trees and platforms would obscure enemy vision and could be used by tribe members to lie in wait and jump on any approaching enemies. This is their specialty after all. Saurians and people alike use hooks to maneuver their way around, something the monsters are not skilled at. The only ones that could cause trouble are teleporting enemies, such as Abyss mages or Rift hounds, but their numbers would be much fewer and easier to control, and they can only teleport short distances. The entire tribe and all their houses may be hanging off the side of a cliff, but that does make it inaccessible for a majority of enemies. Combine that with a single entry point that has multiple wooden sections that can be destroyed, and really, you should be safe and able to fend them off from a distance. If the enemy numbers become too overwhelming, just cut them off from the town. A big problem with this tribe though is that they seem to be allergic to ranged weapons. In fact, a lot of Natlan is. Of the scion of canopy warriors, only one is purely ranged, and it isn't exactly subtle. The others do have ranged attacks, but they're just throwing their swords, so that isn't much better. For the tribe that is meant to be the scouts of Natlan, they're not particularly scouty, and if enemies did break through all of these defenses, it would be a very precarious battle, what with the huge drop down below and zero safety railings.
Damn! He ain't gonna be in rush hour 3.
Isn't it enough to be living life on the edge of a cliff? Why add even more danger? And there is only one feasible way of escaping, that is if you're not injured, and that escape route would be to head up and then probably scale down the cliff through here. The location of the tumor that spawns here though is actually pretty good for them, so realistically they could hold their own very well. Let's breeze on over to the... oh yeah, forgot about that. Though I would love to know how cargo is transported from this region of Natlan to the stadium. Wait, hold up. I think I found it. So if you're a merchant wanting to head from Natlan City to the Masters of the Nightwind by foot, this is the way you would be headed. Once again though, Natlan's natural landscape becomes the main defense for the Masters of the Nightwind. They also have bridges that could be destroyed, and of course, if worse came to worse, the people could hole up inside the main building as a last defense. As long as they're cut off from the mainland though, it would be near impossible for the enemies to reach them anyway. This guard's dialogue, however, seems to imply that they needed outside help to hold up against the Abyss, but he does also give us more information on how the tribe handles these situations. Given their reputation, their fighting style does make sense. Hide away and beat the monsters with their unique skills, such as the phlogiston engravings. Phlogiston engravings are a very unique way of fighting, that's for sure, and the Masters of the Nightwind seem to be the only ones able to manipulate them. The sort that they use is a mixture of phlogiston and their well-known graffiti. I wish I could summon an air balloon. So it's more of an indirect form of battle that can summon objects or presumably attack nearby enemies and even give buffs to the user. The Masters of the Nightwind natural sensitivity to the Night Kingdom means that most are able to practice mystic arts, and this can branch into many other things. For example, most of the doctors and healers of Natlan are from this tribe too, so they do have many cards up their sleeve. Ah, the Wild West. I mean the Flower Feather Clan. This tribe has possibly the greatest advantage of all, the air. In Natlan's ancient past, the Flower Feather tribe was renowned for its strength and numbers. They were basically responsible for most of Natlan's defense. And even in current day Natlan, their tribe is still going strong. So their warriors have strength and the ability to fly by riding the Kukasaurs.
I alone.
This combined with the air balloons— what? No, not you. I've found someone better— makes them formidable opponents. The greatest thing about this tribe, and why I think it is probably the best one, is that technically speaking, it's a movable town. Unless somehow the Abyss caught them extremely off guard, realistically, they should never be able to get into this place. It's also built with flying in mind, with multiple landing areas, allowing riders to whiz around with ease. A critique I do have though is the location they chose to settle. There are so many other options they could have gone for. Just pick any random cliff top. There's plenty in the Natlan region, but this one is just so awkwardly placed and actually has some gaping flaws. No, I don't want to die at Renovo. This back entrance, for instance, what in Archon's name is going on here? You might as well have a giant sign saying, "All monsters welcome." I don't know who these spikes are supposed to stop either. Why are they just placed in the most random spots? And looking at how concealed this entrance is in the first place, monsters could easily sneak up on the tribe from this side. Look, an army could even just enter from underneath by climbing up this hill. Or if they wanted to deal even more damage, simply set the place on fire. Most of it is made out of wood. Actually, if we put our safety inspector hats on for a moment, this entire place is a flying fire hazard, primarily constructed from wood, up high in the air, and torches scattered all over the place. Sooner or later, something's gonna catch fire. Although I love that the targets they use look like Abyss mages. The front entrance is much better, so as long as they cut off access to the balloon lift, enemies wouldn't be able to reach the tribe. Why not make use of your huge aerial advantage and have only one entrance? That way, even if you cut enemies off, the people of the tribe can still go to and from the place for supplies. And there is one more glaring problem. These balloons holding up the entire tribe from underneath. All you would need is a few well-placed shots from, say, a Hillagel shooter, and bam. The Feather Clan's greatest asset is also its greatest weakness. This is pretty much the Flower Feather Clan's one fatal flaw, because other than that, I would wager they would actually be the tribe to survive the longest. And if they adjusted their defenses or location just a little bit, they would become near impossible to defeat. So now that we've more or less inspected the defenses of the tribes, how is the military situation in Natlan, the nation of war?
There's no war in
Natlan.
Sounds about right. The people that live here have been dealing with the Abyss for as long as they can remember. The Aztecs didn't have an organized military system, and instead relied on different people and divisions to provide warriors when called upon. Each has their own separate units. As a warrior society, Natlan does something else very similar. They have different classes you can be promoted to when you prove your worth. Each tribe having their own style of dress and equipment was also common in Aztec society, just as it is in Natlan. And the headpieces of the Saurian warriors get more extravagant too. The tribes being as separate as they are though could serve as a disadvantage. They might end up being more disorganized or lacking in overall strategy than if they were closer. The Natlanese are not trained in the same way that, say, the Millelef are. They all train within their own tribe's unit, so with vastly different types of training depending on where you're from, organization would be a potentially huge problem. Different tactics, different fighting styles, and no standard military form. Not too dissimilar to what we see with Sumeru. In the mutual security event, it's stated that the core of 30 have a critical issue in the degree of organization, and they are also made up of many Eremite organizations and have a relaxed approach to training and the delegation of manpower. Natlan may not be as bad as this, but you can definitely see the similarities. They also don't have dedicated factories and rely on individual forges, compared to the Millelith, who have huge factories such as the Blackcliff Forge for production of weapons and equipment, and strict standardized military training for all soldiers. The Millelith places heavy importance on strategy in battle. Meanwhile, Natlan certainly seems to have little to no strategy when we go through the war scenario. As Sun Tzu once said, "If you know your enemy, leave yourselves without walls." But I suppose we could look at it another way. How do you counter something that at its very core is a disorganized chaos that wants only to consume everything in its path? This is something we see play out in the Archon quest. It becomes pure chaos and desperation. We see zero war strategy or planning from Mavuika or anyone else really. The very fact that the Pyro Archon herself has not explained to the people of Natlan how bad the Abyss situation really is leaves them in blissful ignorance until it's too late for them to prepare and take action. We do at the very least see another system come into play, the couriers. Inspired by the Inca chasqui, these were highly skilled messengers. While we had already come across them in Natlan, we now see how useful they can be during wartime for delivering orders and allowing for for fast action to be taken. Also whistles. All of the warriors have whistles to communicate and send warnings. I found that there are a few confusing instances throughout the war scenario, such as this group for example. The description gives us a brief summary of how they were initially going to escape through this route, but couldn't and so headed through the mountains instead. In my scenario they died because the traveler didn't arrive in time, but we're not taking the traveler into the equation for any of this discussion, especially not after the incident. My biggest question here is, considering just how useful the air balloons could be, can they not be used to carry large amounts of people and as a way of escape? Why head out on foot where you're extremely vulnerable? Hey, that's her! What? You're probably wondering how I ended up here. Well, that's a long story. Well, okay, it actually isn't that long. Turns out my past has finally caught up to me. But being in the slammer has given me time to reflect on Natlan's guards. We already briefly talked about the Saurian tribe warriors, and they seem to have 3 different ranks to progress through, at least according to the lore we can infer from the whistles they drop. Sentries are trainee warriors and presumably also include people like this guy. Then there's the tribe warrior guard, and the guards are followed by Saurian crowned warriors. These are warriors of the highest rank. So first are the people of the springs. Their warriors consist of a close combat warrior who seems like the weakest one. Bro, what is going on? What? Punching abyss enemies has got to be the least effective form of fighting them, and will probably get you one shot. Then your pretty standard warrior wielding a sword, and a warrior unique to this tribe, he uses a harpoon and knife to throw at enemies. The Saurian crowned warriors use ginormous ranged weapons in the form of a slingshot and hydro cannon. Can we just question how they even use this? The downsides of these weapons are that they are slow, but are very useful once set up, and can also be used for fast movement, allowing the warriors to get around from one place to another with lightning speed. We should also consider placement of warriors and sentries. Since all these warrior enemies out in the wild technically count, them attacking us is probably just more of a gameplay thing, and at the end of the day they are warriors. These warriors are stationed all around the outskirts, but they've got weak points here and here, which is actually where the abyss pylons do spawn. So while the warriors could rush to these spots, ideally you would want some already placed here too. You would at the very least need 1 vision user stationed at each major tribe hub too. Actually I say that, but it's stated that all is needed to destroy an abyss pylon is elemental attacks. So technically, other tribe members that can use elemental attacks should be able to handle these. They just wouldn't be impervious to the corruption. The scions have only 1 outpost along the way, a few scattered along the mountain peak, but the strategic placement could use a lot of work. Oh, but it gets worse. This warrior? Yeah, he's using a claymore. Why?
I don't know.
This is a tribe that thrives on swift movement and sneaky maneuvers. It's no wonder you guys didn't last long if you're flying around with that. All 3 of the warriors throw their swords. Like, guys, please just get bows or something. Look, it even staggers him after. Even an actual boomerang is better than this. And the 2 Saurian crowned warriors aren't much better. One is using a giant saw and the other a giant cannon. Though to be fair, they do seem to have a lot more maneuverability somehow, don't question it. We can actually see them using the hooks on the weapon to move and attack. The children of echoes have much better placement with actual outposts that look like they could withstand a lot. Yep, that's rock alright. Considering where the tumor spawned, the warriors would be able to surround it in an instant and at the very least hold off the enemies for a long while with their brute force fighting style. This tribe of course has the largest weapons, but for them it actually makes sense. Although the normal warrior's unique move is more of a detriment than anything. I'm starting to see why Natlan is not doing very well. Nation of War by the way, but can barely use a weapon. The Masters of the Nightwind don't have conventional strength, so rely a lot more on buffs, which is fine. But yeah, their military is not in a good state. It's all well and good infusing your weapon with cryo, but they can barely wield the weapon itself. The Saurian crowned warriors at least have more strength thanks to their mastery of the spirit speaker thing, and the other one wields a giant cannon that can lock onto the target, which is pretty useful. There aren't really many warriors stationed outside of the Nightwind tribe, and given the terrain it would take them much longer longer to get to the aid of the tribe. You know how I said earlier in the video that it's confusing how the Flower Feather clan of all the tribes seemed to not last nearly as long? Well, let's expand on this, because while there are definitely some issues, for example their defense's weak points, I believe they have a lot more good going for them than bad. Their warriors being spread out so far across the map, for example, at least in this tribe's case, is actually a good strategy. Given their unique skill sets, the more land they can cover the better, because the moment something goes wrong, they can react fast and easily outpace enemies from the sky, taking vital information back to the tribe's base. The only problem with this tribe is the conflicting information we're given. So first off, the bad. All of the warriors, bar a single one, engage in close combat. This guy uses a hammer, like, you are not flying in the air with that thing in your back, buddy. The good, the base itself heavily implies that most do train with a bow. If we simply look at just how many targets there are, we see arrows lodged into them and quivers scattered all around. And not only this, aerial bow combat. They also do seem to use those heavy cannons, but none of the warrior enemies do, so I'm not too sure on this really. But we could look at all of this another way. They have a wide range of warriors, trained in different areas, and most are still trained with bows too, so this isn't a bad thing really. And since pretty much all tribe members also ride kukasaurs, they have a hugely unfair advantage over the Abyss enemies. Overall, from the information we can gather, the Natlanese are very allergic to bows and long-range weapons, it would seem, even when it would benefit them the most. But we've talked enough about their fighting style and weapons. What about their protection? Their armor? About that.
Where is your power armor?
They have head protection, but this seems to be as far as it goes for most of them. There isn't much in the way of protection going on here at all. But, and this is a big but, the material of their clothing could be a kind of soft body armor. Unfortunately, I think it's impossible to tell if this is the case, but Natlan draws from Mesoamerican culture for inspiration, and the Aztecs in particular used a sort of soft body armor piece consisting of reinforced cotton and layers of fabric, or since alpacas are a common sight in Natlan, they might even be using alpaca wool. Either way, this provided protection from many different types of blows, from clubs, spears, arrows, even muskets, while still allowing for ease of movement and flexibility. Considering the Hilichurl's weapons aren't particularly advanced, they would provide much needed protection and most probably save a lot of lives. Still though, even if we assume that their clothing is protective, it doesn't cover their entire body and they don't have any other form of protection such as a shield. Like,
What are those?
get out of those hills. You are not going to battle with those on. This takes us on to our next point, the lack of weapons production. A majority of people from the Children of Echoes are taught to mine and smith, so Natlan is not lacking in blacksmiths needed to manufacture weapons and such. They have an entire tribe dedicated to it, but there are 2 forges in the Children of Echoes, and if we count the salutary furnace, 3 forges supplying the entirety of Natlan. Guys, you need factory level production here. The Abyss is not gonna stop coming. The description of the forge even implies the situation is far worse. Essentially, they're not mass producing, but rather forging weapons on a case-by-case basis, with unique personal weapons being made, meaning forging will take way longer and probably not be worth it in the long run. Thanks to the saurians, Natlan does have some very distinct advantages here too. We already touched upon the kukasaurs, and the ichthyosaurs are somewhat similar. They can glide, so again would have an aerial advantage over enemies, and are also capable of utilizing projectile attacks. The yumpkasaurs have a built-in grappling hook, so alongside the humans that have their own man-made hooks can move around mountains and forests easily, attacking enemies from above. And just to add to this, the Scions and Flower Feather clan make use of platforms that can only be reached by them too. I would imagine the saurs, just like the kukasaurs, are also ridden by people and have fast movement in the water. Then finally the Tapetlosaurus. This saurian can act as a makeshift drill, which could have a variety of uses during an invasion. For example, they can dig tunnels and ambush enemies, or use them as a means of escape. Okay, just hear me out here. This is where we get to our next point, that the war has most likely allowed for an acceleration in technological development. Now, whether some of this technology fits into the world of Teyvat is a whole other discussion entirely.
Wow, she's so cool.
That's Future Bee's problem. We're here to focus on how this technology would help against the Abyss. Something old dragon technology, phlogiston. Jililan definitely knows how to make a motorcycle out of things that probably haven't even been invented yet. Anyway, so yes, ignoring that, technological advancement does make sense in the context of Natlan's conflicts. This need to develop faster to tackle a rising threat is something that tends to happen during wars. Natlan has phlogiston magic-y stuff combined with technology as an advantage. Except fact, most of the technological innovation isn't even used to assist in war efforts. It's used for DJ parties. They're not like Fontaine or Liyue. They don't have huge factories churning out mechs or weapons. It's kind of all over the place. As we saw with the Flower Feather clan, they do have air balloons, and ideally they should have been manufacturing air balloons on a nationwide level, because the pros of something like this for war far outweigh the cons. Scouting, supply drops, aerial attacks, the list goes on. Also, guns just kind of exist, but only for a select few people. The Children of Echoes have drills. These could quite literally change the game. Imagine if they tunneled out an entire underground system as a means of getting around during an invasion. They have a somewhat advanced road system though, that does make movement of military and supplies easy. At the very least, they probably produce a lot of these cannons. How though, I have no idea. By and large, it's a lot of very confusing decisions from Natlan. For a nation that is almost constantly at war, I would assume that most Mora is being used to strengthen the fighters and bolster defense, but having looked all over the region, this just isn't very evident. Are the tribes in the main city defended well enough if we take into account everything we've covered so far? I would say that also depends on who is attacking. We'll be going only on Abyss enemies that are encountered during the Archon Quest invasions. So, which enemies would this include? The Hilichel family, which is quite extensive, and then the Abyss. Huh? What? Where am I? Consisting of Abyss Mages, Rift Hounds, Mimics, and
Larry.
The Hilichels would most likely make up the bulk of the infantry for the Abyss army. Easy to tackle when we take into account the skill sets of the Natlanese, but the big boys could pose a problem unless you're a Saurian crowned warrior or vision user. So you would want most warriors dealing with the large groups, and then other units to certain monsters depending on elemental types. Abyss Mages and Rift Hounds would be the most annoying because they can teleport. Not to mention, some of these enemies apply debuffs that will literally drain a person's HP. Arguably the worst enemy though is the Mimi Flora. It isn't really something they cover much in the game though. I mean, it's never shown in cutscenes changing at command, and while it's in a different form, it has an extra shield, which can only be broken with elemental attacks. If you manage to break the shield and reveal its true form, this form's attacks inflict dots. The absolute unpredictability of an enemy like this would make it almost impossible to defeat. And you know something else they don't touch upon? The Abyss can take on the form of loved ones and literally inflict torture on people. The Abyss could use this tactic to severely demoralize Natlan's warriors in an ambush. The end goal of the Abyss is to snuff out the sacred flame. So basically, what good old Goth here really needs to do is wear down and distract Natlan as much as possible, spawning pylons and tumors along vital supply chains, surrounding the tribes through their weak points, leaving a window of opportunity to take the flame. Yeah, so in the time it's taken me to make this video, an entire patch cycle has run through, meaning the final region of Natlan is out. Come with me and we'll take a brief look at what we've got going on here too. The collective of Plenty and Natlan's farmers, so they have an inherent advantage here. A huge surplus of food would allow them to last much longer, though the food storage doesn't look to be very well protected. And like we discussed earlier, much like the people of the Springs, this could become easily corrupted and all food would end up inedible. As we know from the Archon quests, they were indeed affected the least by the invasion compared to all other tribes, since they're so far away. The main issue I can see here is their settlement's location, what with being on an active volcano and everything, but yeah, no biggie. I was just about to praise the main entrance. You know, it's got a bridge. We love bridges around here. Except, even if you cut off the bridge, enemies could just easily jump down and they would be right in the heart of the tribe. The only thing I would fix about the other entrance is maybe placing a wall along here, then you would be very secure. But again, I'll give them credit where it's due. They are on a volcano, so it depends how you look at it. Harsh conditions make it more treacherous for enemies too, and the overall terrain stops them altogether from attacking the tribe any other way than through these 2 points. Another potential downside is that they only engage in close combat. They do technically have 2 warrior types that use ranged weapons, but lore-wise, ranged warriors are few and far between in this tribe. There's no doubt they're the strongest, but they don't have much of a unique advantage outside of this, at least compared to the other tribes. The odds are so heavily stacked against them in every way imaginable. The only way they're surviving an Abyss invasion is by killing off Koichi. They would put up a very good fight, but they still have a lot of shortcomings. Even without the Abyss tumors, I think they would have still struggled tremendously. Their defenses could use a huge amount of work, and even though they are a nation of warriors, their lack of preparation and strategy would be detrimental to their downfall. If not for the appearance of the final hero and the power of the Divine Throne, Natlan, for all its prowess, would likely not survive.